In the heart of Ikorodu, where the red earth stained the souls of every wanderer and the palm trees bent with whispers from the ancestors, there lived a young woman called Jomiloju. Her story, like the flow of a winding river, was not smooth from its beginning. For when she was but a child of 5, her mother abandoned her at the doorway of a small shrine, leaving her with only tears for a lullaby. Yet the spirits did not leave her empty. They placed in her chest a voice, one that rose like the morning cockcrow and carried the weight of sorrow and hope together. From childhood, Jomiloju sang to silence her hunger and sang to chase away the loneliness that pressed on her like heavy night dew. But the gift of the gods is never without trial. Though her voice was sweet, she wandered for long seasons without knowing her true self. She became like a drum without a drummer, beautiful but uncertain of its rhythm. It was in those days that she joined her spirited friend Jomiloju, whose energy flowed like palm wine poured too freely. Together, they performed at gatherings, their voices and dances stirring the dust of the village square. Money rained upon their mats, yet what excited Jomiloju filled Jomiloju with unease. For she feared that their gift was being sold like cheap cola at the market, stripped of the spirit that once gave it meaning. Among those who circled their stage was Seye, a cunning man whose eyes were sharper than the cutlass used to split palm fruit. He promised riches, he promised fame, but in his words lay the hiss of the serpent. Jomiloju felt it, yet Jomiloju was drunk with his promises. Beside Jomiloju stood Damalola, the man she loved. He admired her voice but carried a mother whose tongue was bitter. That woman, hardened by grief of a first son lost to death, despised Jomiloju and told her she was nothing but trouble, a shadow compared to the child she had buried. Still, Jomiloju pressed forward, though her spirit grew restless. She confronted Seye, telling him she wished to part ways. But the man laid before her cowries worth more than she had ever seen, claiming his sweat had watered her path, demanding she repay every share. Jomiloju returned what little she had, yet knew in her heart that to leave the grip of greed always carries a cost. Not long after, grief fell upon her like harmattan dust. Word came that Damalola and his father had been struck down in the night. Their blood spilled on the roadside, and the whisper said it was the work of faceless robbers. Wailing filled Ikorodu, and the drums of mourning were beaten for many days. But truth, like smoke, cannot be hidden under a calabash. Seye slithered close, pretending to comfort Jomiloju. Yet with a sly grin, he confessed, those deaths were never meant to be. They were seeds of his wicked scheme, planted so that he might rise higher, escape the chains of his own failures. His tongue poured venom as he told Jomiloju she belonged to him, that wherever she fled, his shadow would follow. If she dared resist, even the old woman Eduwu, mother of Damalola, would taste his wrath. Jomiloju's knees buckled. She lifted her face to the sky, crying to the gods for help. Her tears fell like rain into dry earth, asking for direction in a world that seemed to betray her at every turn. In those days, Eduwu herself was broken, stripped of land and wealth after her husband's death swallowed everything. Only a small abandoned house in distant Soko remained. She sought to live quietly, but Jomiloju followed, declaring with the boldness of youth that where Eduwu went, she too would go. And so the two women journeyed together, bound not by blood but by sorrow, carrying only hope and each other into the silence of Soko. The old house they entered was filled with dust and silence, but within those walls the ancestors stirred. Jomiloju sought work in the fields and found labor among yam harvesters. There, her sweat mixed with the earth until the soil knew her name. It was in those fields she caught the eye of Timelaine, the master of the farmlands, whose hands were callous from labor though he was of noble lineage. He watched her work with persistence, refusing to rest, her spirit unbroken though her back bent under the sun. Timelaine was moved. He offered her cool water when the sun struck hard, and though words were few, the spirits began weaving threads between them. Meanwhile, Eduwu's grief still pressed like a millstone. She turned away visitors, pushed aside comfort, even struck Jomiloju with harsh words. Yet the young woman remained near, her patience like the tortoise that slowly but surely reaches its destination. Seasons turned. Jomiloju's voice returned in a new way, not in the taverns of Ikorodu but in the festivals of soccer. At one gathering, she was called to sing. Her heart trembled, but when her voice rose, it carried like smoke from burning wood, straight into the ears of Timelaine. The people cheered, clapping their hands, saying her song was like cool breeze after a long day's toil. News of her gift spread across villages like the talking drum that carries secrets from one town to another. But this also carried danger. Seye, who had vowed never to release her, heard of her rising star. His greed flared, and his men scouted the paths leading to Sokor. Even so, the bond between Jomiloju and Timelaine grew stronger. He shared with her his story of returning to the land after journeys far and wide. He spoke of rebuilding his father's farm so that it might feed many mouths. Jomiloju, in turn, shared her scars of abandonment, of betrayal, of a voice nearly lost. And in that exchange, both found healing. But love, like the moon, must sometimes pass through darkness. One night, fire rose from the storehouse of Timelaine's farm. Flames devoured the yam stored for the season, threatening his livelihood. In the chaos, Seye appeared, declaring himself the hand behind both past and present sorrows. He sought to drag Jomiloju back, to enslave her gift for his own gain. Yet the ancestors did not sleep. Eduwu, who once drowned in grief, found courage in her bones. She stood before Seye, refusing to bow. The people rallied, and the lawmen of the land arrived, binding Seye in chains. Still, Jomiloju wept, blaming herself for the ruin brought upon those she loved. But Timelaine reminded her that love is not free of trials, it is proven by them. And as they searched the ashes, they found that some of the yams had roasted sweet instead of burning to waste. The people laughed, saying what the fire meant for destruction had turned to nourishment. So it was that from pain, sweetness emerged. Jomiloju no longer ran from love. With Timelaine she built a life, their names joined like two calabashes bound with rope. Eduwu too found peace, her eyes once dim with sorrow now glowing with quiet strength. For as the elders say, when fire eats the homestead, it is not only ash it leaves behind. Sometimes it leaves coal, and with coal one can light a new flame.